The following presentation looks at what scholars do in their work day by day and how that relates to the kind of activities that you as a student will be involved in doing your own academic work. Scholarship, what is it about? Scholarship is all about a profound discontent, about a quest to discover more, about a burning desire to solve society's problems and make a better world. That's a definition that I created, and I think it works fairly well. What we're going to be looking at here is something that comes out of the Association of College and Research Libraries. In 2015, they developed a framework for information literacy for higher education, and its central concepts really describe the work of a scholar in today's age. There are several principles. The first of these, authority is constructed and contextual. So what do we mean by authority? Authority describes the degree to which we find a piece of information reliable, believable, trustworthy. Information comes out of two contexts. There's a context that is involved in the delivery of the information and a context about the receiver of the information. Authority is constructed because we as users have to give information its authority by evaluating it for quality and relevance. Authority really is in the eye of the beholder or the receiver of information. If we trust it, we give it authority. If we don't give it authority. So these are the two contexts. First of all, the author. What is his or her setting? That could be an academic discipline. Perhaps the person is a university professor. An official position, maybe it's the mayor or the governor or something like that. Or an eyewitness, someone who actually saw what happened. The receiver is the other context, and the receiver has to ask, do I believe this? Would I rely on this? Why or why not? That last question is very important. So, you have to construct authority as a receiver, not just as a provider. Even if the author is an expert, is the author biased or showing improper motives? Was the information created with the appropriate research? Is this information relevant to my information need? If it's not relevant, it has no authority in the situation within where you are operating. So authority in the eye of the receiver. If you don't accept a piece of information as reliable or necessary for your information need, it loses its authority. Decisions we make about authority are important. We need really sound reasons, not just our own opinions, if we're going to reject an authority or the authority of a piece of information, or going to accept the authority of a piece of information. We need reasons, not just opinion. The second principle, information creation as a process. Every piece of information has a history of development. It didn't suddenly appear like magic. The process of creation tells us a lot about quality, the quality of the information and the nature of the information. So ask yourself things like this. Did this piece of information come out of solid research, or is it just opinion? What were the processes of editorial review of people who checked this out? Peer review, where a manuscript is checked out by other scholars in the field and evaluated before it is sent back to the editor for further evaluations? Or was it just self-published, posted online with no one checking it out? Sometimes the choice of where to publish is important. So if you have a journal article, is that more important than having it on a website? If the website is ugly, does that imply the content is bad? Don't necessarily believe that. There are a lot of professors who have really poor web skills, create terribly ugly websites that have wonderful content in them. The format, the beauty or ugliness of the website doesn't necessarily mean anything about the content. Does the format tell you anything about the audience? If it's in a journal article or a magazine or a website, is it targeted for a different kind of audience? And does that affect the kind of quality that it has? Third principle, information has value. We all know about this one. There are several dimensions of value, four in particular. As a commodity to buy or sell, every time you've bought an expensive textbook or a magazine, or you've subscribed to a newspaper online or whatever, you realize that it costs money. Academic literature is grossly overpriced, and academic publishers really have a reckoning to face as they look at the way in which the public is beginning to react to the high cost of the materials they produce. So that's a factor. But information is also a means of education. Educational value is very important. And every time you do a reading for a course, you're educating yourself and you're using information to do it. Information is also a means of influencing people. You know that for a fact every time someone says something to persuade you, or every time you read an advertisement, you realize that there is influence going on. And it's also obviously a means to bring progress. No real progress, advancement of knowledge comes without dissemination of information. So, how can this influence us? Commercial value. You might not be able to afford to have it. That's a big problem. If it's an expensive item, you might not buy it. You might not read it. Academic publishers are overpricing their work. And as a counter to this, there's a new open access movement that's trying to provide some resources for free. And increasingly, you're finding that there are journal articles and even whole books that are available for free online because open access people are trying to put them there as a counter to the high prices of academic literature. When we speak of commercial value, we also have to pay attention to things like intellectual property and copyright. And this is really important. If someone publishes an original information, it belongs to the author to sell or give away. Using it in plagiarism or using restricted content without paying is intellectual theft. So every time you download a book that is actually in copyright on one of those dubious sites out of Eastern Europe or Asia, you're really committing a violent act against the author. You're depriving that author of income. An author has a right to control the distribution of his or her information, which is what copyright is all about. As a means of education, influence, or advancement, information has great value. You can think of libraries, textbooks, internet, position papers, scientific studies. There is a lot of educational material available to us. For scholars, every subject discipline has a significant knowledge base that is specific to that particular discipline. The knowledge base grows slowly through research. It builds upon earlier work, so newer studies build upon earlier studies, sometimes debunk earlier studies. Scholars protect their knowledge base against poor research and untested ideas. And that's important as well. Scholars don't allow shoddy work to exist within their discipline because they know that it is contrary to a solid knowledge base. Fourth principle, research as inquiry. This one is going to be really important to you as well as a student. No research project has value if it simply discovers what's already known. If you're simply reciting what has already been written in other works, you're not really doing research. Research at its heart is a quest, an inquiry. It's a problem-solving task. It's more than summarizing facts. So here's some guidelines. Start with a question or a thesis. A thesis is just an initial answer to a question, sort of a tentative answer to a question. If you can answer the question by looking something up, it's not research. Genuine research is problem solving. It seeks an answer beyond the existing facts. So compilation is not at all what we're looking for. Summarizing what you read is just a reading report. It's not research. I've got a model here for genuine research. It begins with a question that focuses on some problem or issue that needs to be addressed. So up here you've got a question. And as you move down through data collection, various pieces of data, you begin to synthesize it. You begin to put it together, find who agrees with who, etc. You start to analyze your data in light of the question. So the question is all important, and the data is synthesized and analyzed in order to begin to find a tentative answer to your question. Perhaps you begin grouping points of view. You begin analyzing points of view. All of this turns into information, which is really processed data that has been processed in light of your question, and you come up with conclusions and recommendations at the end. So here's some examples of some questions that you might ask. What is the most effective way to combat climate change, regulation, or carbon taxes? There's quite a debate about this, which is the most valuable way to go. Is global free trade actually of economic benefit for the poorest producers of goods? We keep hearing that global free trade is a good thing, but the people on the ground, the people in the factories or on the farms, are they actually benefiting from global free trade? To what extent is the movie The Da Vinci Code an accurate depiction of history? It's got an alternate view of the history of Jesus and of the church. Is it accurate? All such questions demand analysis. You can't just answer them by looking up an answer in a book or an article. You have to do some digging. You have to do some thinking and analysis. The fifth principle, scholarship as conversation. Very important. Scholars don't work in isolation. They work in a community of other scholars. One scholar publishes research. Other scholars discuss it, evaluate it, even criticize it. They do this in a number of ways. They do it by their own writings, which cite earlier works and evaluate them, sometimes contradict them, and so on. It's also done through things like conferences, where scholars get together and present papers and have discussions and debates. So it's done in a number of ways. Academic social media is an increasing way in which scholars are debating and discussing the research that is coming out. So what this does is it generates a history of discussions in print or in person, which amount to a conversation, the back and forth that goes on as people debate and discuss ideas that are part of the research process. Here's an example of it. This kind of pictures what's going on. So you've got Smith, who argued something. Johnson sees some value in Smith, but he really agrees more with Jones. And Jones disagrees with Smith and proposes alternatively something else. So Jones is not agreeing with Smith. Jones is proposing something new. And imagine yourself sitting in a room with these various scholars, listening to them debate and back and forth, and sometimes it gets a little heated. Sometimes a couple of scholars decide they're going to sit together because they really like what one another is saying. You make sense of it all, and you show why one view or line of evidence is more credible than the others. So why is scholarly conversation important? It helps to improve quality. Findings are retested, views are challenged, evidence is checked. So that really improves quality. People are watching one another's work as scholars, and they're not letting shoddy stuff get through, if they can at all possibly help it. It leads to advances in solving research problems. When you put a lot of minds together debating a particular issue and you have several takes on it, that really advances the research problem solution. And it gives strength to disciplines by solidifying their knowledge bases as reliable. If you can't check out your knowledge base, if you can't actually evaluate and test and challenge the things that are going into your knowledge base, then you can't prove reliability. So the scholarly balances to enable the knowledge base to succeed. Scholars converse through things like publications, books and journal articles that refer to earlier studies, conferences, academic and professional social media. Sixth principle, searching as strategic exploration. It's not easy to find the information that you need. It requires planning and strategy as you search for information. This is all about search. Some beginning researchers make serious errors regarding how to think about information searching. They'll search for a topic rather than seeking results that deal with their question. So they just want stuff about this topic rather than realizing that really what they're searching for is an answer to their question. And they assume that once they've searched, they have to live with their results. That is often the case if you're using Google or something. But if you're using academic databases, you'll find that there are all kinds of options once you have your first set of results to refine them. Today's academic databases have all kinds of options. Focus on searching for resources that meet the needs of your research, and then figure out advanced features of databases. There's all kinds of advanced things that you can do to narrow your results and to get them more focused on what you're actually seeking. Searching for information is rarely a one-step process if you're doing academic research. You need to use advanced search engine features to narrow and refine your results. If trying one process fails, you might have to step back and try a different approach, a different kind of search, a different kind of database. Strategy is the key to success when you're searching for information. So we've got 6 concepts for successful scholarship. Authority is constructed and contextual. What information do you trust and why? Information creation is a process. How is it created tells a lot about its value. Information has value financially and benefit for humanity. Research is inquiry, not compiling what is known, but finding what is not known. Scholarship as conversation. Many voices shape our findings. And then searching as strategic exploration. Plan and strategize at every stage.